A very happy Sabbath to each one of you. And that includes those of you who are watching online and those of you who are in the elevated seats in this place of worship. Now, it works. I just want to say a few things before I get started. When I was first told that my wife was going to read the scripture reading, I was actually quite happy because I kind of thought that she was going to be sitting behind and she wouldn't be able to tell me, cut down, you're going too long. But then I found out that actually she is going to be sitting in front. But I did get some counsel from one of the individuals that met at the back. They told me that whenever they speak, they don't look at their family or friends because there's a lot of suggestions. Just look at those who are smiling at you. So I'll try and do that. We are fortunate to be here in a place where we can worship freely. There are many parts of the world where that cannot be taken for granted. And I want to thank those who have preceded before me with the mics in different forms. The musicians, the children's story, let me not forget the scripture reading, all that went into our worship service. And my prayer is that God will use me to share with you a message that hopefully will help each one of you, like the way I have been helped through this message. A thorn in the flesh. Again, in the back room, a lot of things happen. My wife told the others that were there that she was the thorn that I was going to talk about, but well, she knows better than that. But we'll get into that a little later, all right? But a thorn in the flesh. Let's start with a parable. We are all invited to the Air Force Academy that's just down the road, and we are honored to hop into a plane and go for a ride. And so we are sitting, looking at Khao Yai National Park, Pak Chong, Klang Dong, all the fruits that are there. We see AIU. And then we realize that the engine, one of the engines, burst into flame. And of course, you can imagine the scene of worried faces. Some even expressed it. But then very soon, the captain swings the cockpit door open and comes out and said, "My dear AIU passengers, I have bad news and good news. The bad news is that the plane is burning and we are going to crash." And some of you are thinking, wow, we knew that. Then the good news. The good news is I have enough parachutes for each of you. And all you need to be alive is a parachute. So he gives us some instructions and gets us to line up as he swings open the door. And the first person there was Mrs. Alvina. Alvina is wearing red today. But that wasn't enough. When she came to the captain, she said, "Captain, I have a wish. It's Chinese New Year. And yeah, I know I'm an Indian, but I want to wish all my Chinese friends a happy Chinese New Year. So can I have a red parachute?" And the captain looks at Mrs. Alvina and said, "Mrs. Alvina, all you need is a parachute. Doesn't matter what color it is." Anyway, he couldn't even wait. He just pushes her down. There she goes flying. And then next on line was Patricia Foster. You know, those of you who know Mrs. Foster, she said, I got it. I have it packed. But then she turns to the captain. "Captain, just one thing. I've always wanted to have a good view of this area. Can I have a pair of goggles? That's all I need to make it perfect." And the captain looks at Patricia Foster and says, "Pat, all you need is a parachute." And again, pushes her down. Then come our cameraman, Samay. Samay says, "Captain, that's okay. But you know, I work for the IT department, for the media. Can I take my camera with me so that I can video the whole place?" Again, the captain looks at and shakes his head. "Samay, all you need is a parachute," and pushes him down. Then comes Dr. Valamba, the Dean of Science. And he says, "All right, Captain, what is the statistical probability that when we crash land, we still can be alive?" And the captain says, "Oh, Mr. Smarty," whatever they call it, "all you need is a parachute," and pushes him down. You know, we laugh because that's kind of ridiculous, right? Who wants a pair of goggles or a pink parachute or red parachute or whatever colored parachute when life is at stake? But you know, in the walk of life, it's no laughing matter. And I can't read there, but I can read here. My eyes are like Paul's, you'll find out. I have glasses, but they hinder me, right? So let me put that away. I can read from here. Can you all see that? That's what my wife read earlier, the verses. But I'm going to dissect them. We'll take it one at a time, okay? Paul. Now, I'm a teacher. So I'm going to give you all a homework, including those of you on the elevated seats. The homework is read the first part of chapter 12. Only 6 verses, right? Verses 1 to 6. At your convenience. Not right now. But when you read it, you'll find Paul talking about some, I'm tempted to use the word weird things. He talks about, he's not even sure. But obviously he was getting some impressions. And he's saying to keep me from becoming proud, conceited. Because of these, what you read in the earlier verses, surpassingly great revelation. There was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan. Now, let's stop for a minute. Again, you all know I'm not a theologian, and I wouldn't pretend to be one. But the question is, who said the thorn? Who gave the thorn? Well, one of two possibilities, right? Either God or the devil. Say Satan. I think you all agree with me. If you don't, you can raise your hand. This is I like what Dr. Maxine did, right? Interaction. It's fine. Raise your hand. Now, I think that it's the devil that sends all these thorns our way, but God is in the business of transforming them to do good for us. Is that possible? Anyway, if nobody raised your hand, I will assume you're agreeing with me. So that's what it was. Paul is saying that thorn, a messenger from Satan. But for what? To help him from becoming too proud. Oh, pride. Do you guys struggle with that? I do. I have a real problem with it, right? Even when I wear a new pair of shoes, I like to, I have a new pair of shoes today because last week my old one came off. Some of you know about it. Anyway, it's so hard not to be proud. Sometimes God reaches us in different ways to keep us humble. You know, this thorn that Paul is talking about, it is no ordinary thorn. It's not like the ones that gets on your finger and you just pull it off and maybe even suck it a little bit so the blood is gone. Well, gone wherever it goes. Anyway, that's not the kind of thorn we are talking about. We are talking about something serious. I couldn't find a better picture, but imagine Paul was walking in those roads laden with all sorts of things, the wind blowing, thorns falling, and one of these thorns went through his sandals and got into his flesh. And as he whims along, he stops on the way and tries to remove it, but couldn't. But that's only an imagery. But the real thing is that he prays about it. He uses a code, so to speak. God, remove this. 3 times he pleaded with God. Now, obviously we know 3 times is just a number. Probably a number that he wanted to use as a code. But I'm glad these people haven't left me. Thank you. 3 times. It could be many, many times. It happens so often that he comes to God and says, God, you remember that thorn in my flesh? That's something that bothers me. I'm back again on my knees praying to you about that thorn in the flesh. The plea was very clear. There is no ambiguity here. Paul made it very clear that he was coming to God and pleading with God to remove that thorn. But we all, especially when we are younger, but even older folks get rejected at times. The answer is no. And it's my grace is sufficient. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Wow. That's interesting. It's almost like a paradox. God's power is made strong in our weakness. That takes some thinking. So remember this when we are weak, when we fail, that maybe it's because God's power is to be expressed in some ways. We need to recognize that it is not us and not our doing if we succeed. But if we fail, it allows us to be more dependent on Christ, on God. So, the rejection, not a good feeling. Some of you may have been rejected. It gets personal. How did that happen? And we often tend to focus on ourselves and even go to the point of, I don't mean literally, some people do literally beat themselves, but look at ourselves and say, I'm no good. At the same time, we have to realize, yes, we're not good enough. But the God who loves us has something in all that, His grace, His marvelous grace that we sang about. Now, of course, the question is this. So what are these thorns? Or is there one thorn? Or is there many thorns? What is the possibility of this thorn that Paul is referring to? So, obviously, there are many suggestions about what the thorn could be. And we will try to look at some texts, scripture texts, to see what they are. So the first possibility is that it was a temptation in the flesh. In the sense, something that Paul does that maybe he enjoyed when he sees food. Some of us have that problem, right? What is the saying? Our eyes are bigger than our stomach or mouth, whatever. We love food. Or we like to put things off. You have a quiz tomorrow, Monday. Or let's wait until Sunday night to study. Right? Even though you are just passing the class. And maybe you should study Saturday night. But we put it off. Paul may not have had that problem, but what other kind of fleshly temptation he could have? Many possibilities. And we won't get into all the details, but I'd rather that we focus on ourselves. What are the kind of temptations that we have, that we struggle with, right? Now, why do we think that it could be a temptation of the flesh? Look at this. Romans 7:18-19, where Paul says that, for I know that the good itself does not dwell in me. This is Apostle Paul We heard about him last week too, right? Pastor Vara preached about Paul. Paul is an eloquent writer. I didn't say speaker. Eloquent writer. And a man we all look up to. In my sinful nature, right? For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. We have heard this many times, right? What he wants to do, he doesn't do. What he doesn't want to do, that he finds himself doing. Does that sound familiar? Any of you have that problem? You do things that you don't want to do? Again? Yeah. Let's look at other possible thorns. Now, Paul, in his life, had quite a bit of enemies, foes, people who questioned, is he really an apostle? Paul had to defend himself. If you look at, there are two texts here, Galatians 1:6-7. I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. They're not following what he's teaching. They're looking for something else, which is really no gospel at all. So he's saying that, why do you want to follow some teaching that is not correct? I know I'm not a super apostle, but I am an apostle. All right, let's go down. 2 Corinthians 12:12. The things that mark an apostle, I qualify. Signs, wonders, and miracles were done among you with great perseverance. So Paul's talking about, I did it all, but you guys still don't accept me. So he was questioned. His apostleship was questioned. He had a lot of enemies. And, this one. You know, I don't know how many of you, many times I look at some of you, especially at work. Is Hayden around? No, Hayden is not here maybe today. But those of you know Hayden, he works in the same office that I do. Such a gentleman. I've never seen him getting irritated. I do. And I used to, why can't I be more like Hayden? Or Dr. Junjun. I have never seen you get upset yet. Please don't show it. But anyway, some of us we just have that demeanor that's, so easy to get along with, calm. Paul, I know some of us are happy about this because we can identify. We have that feisty, watch your tongue, kind of a abrasive nature. This is good news for teachers because you know who Paul's teacher was, right? Gamaliel. He's a great teacher. And I'm sure he talked about politically being correct, PR skills. But somehow Paul must have dozed off. Dr. Panindra, you ever have students taking a nap in your class? Yeah, Paul probably did that. And so he missed that politically correct demeanor that is expected of a preacher, not teacher. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at a text. All right? Galatians 2:11. What does Paul say? He said, when Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face. Come on, that's at his face. We're not talking about, going to a committee and gently talking about a person. No, right there, you have it. I oppose him to his, because he was clearly in the wrong. So some people thought that, Paul actually deserved every whip that he got because of his abrasive nature. His abrasive nature or his frankness, his honesty did not make many friends. That's why he had a lot of enemies. But you know what? It made him a lot of disciples. Or could the thorn, this is the last thorn, last possible thorn that we are looking at. There could be many others. His eyesight. That's an occupational hazard for somebody who writes. Am I right? He wrote a lot. And someone who can't see well, that's not a good thing, right? Again, look at, I made it really big so I can read. Galatians 6:11. And Paul says, see what large letters I use as I write to you with my own hand. Let's go back to that prayer. The four things, if we consider any of those as being his problem, and wonder his pleading with God, are these not appropriate? He's asking not to be tempted very often, not to be beaten very regularly. Oh, talk about his beating. You all know about that, right? Last week we even heard being opinionated. Oh, yeah, that's comforting. He recognized the struggle. His poor eyesight. Is any of this inappropriate? Are any of the requests inappropriate? Pia hasn't shown the hand yet, so I'm still okay. We can say, of course they are appropriate. We wouldn't say they are inappropriate, but would his prayers being answered, where yes, these things are removed, the thorn is removed, will that actually make him a better person? Again, some of us may feel, yeah, why not? Look at the qualifications that is going to improve, right? Better demeanor, more friends, nobody opposing his ministry, better eyesight, all these are good. But the reason why Paul was so effective is because of those thorns. If he did not have temptations often, he would have never embraced the grace of God as he did. he realized that on his own merits, on his own, he cannot appreciate what God has done. Beaten regularly, that helped him to realize the love of his God and the way he dealt with his fellow men. He understood what love really is, what Christ went through on the cross for each one of us. Opinionated. Imagine Paul being meek and timid. Would he have been able to face the legalists of his time? Would he be able to have confronted those who questioned the ministry of Christ and his own ministry from there on? He was able to defend it, and a lot of it was because of his opinionated nature. Now, please, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to encourage us all to be opinionated. There's a time for it, and we all need to pray that God will give us the wisdom to have an opinion when it matters. And, well, I almost used the word shut up, but that's probably a good word in this instance. We also have to have the wisdom to keep our mouth shut when we have to. That's the challenge. The poor Isaac. Now, this is a tough one, right? I mean, why make it difficult for him to see? But you know what? If all of us, as we go through the epistles written by Paul and how he understood God's grace and God's love, it is imperative that he had an insight that is so much more focused than his sight. So he may have sacrificed his sight, but that opened up the window for an insight that most of us struggle to understand. God's grace. You know, we all in our life ask the same question: God, do I really need to have this? It may be a student that is struggling to pay your fees. God, everything is going good for me. My grades are okay. I enjoy the food in the cafeteria, and I don't even complain about my dorm. But why, God? Why am I struggling to meet the ends? I can't pay. And the student finance office says that you can't register. God! And you get on your knees. It may be a teacher. A teacher who enjoys teaching, who love smoke like you actually even like the apartment that you are given. But then you find that you are struggling with a physical ailment. And you wonder, God, I'm just beginning to get hold of how things are happening here. I'm just beginning to enjoy working at AIU. Why, God, can't you remove this thorn in my flesh? It could even be someone from the Hope Channel. You know, it's so good to see some of this. You know, it tells you how long you've been around. I saw Eldon Lee a little earlier with his... Eldon, are you still here? With his baby. There he is. And Brian Scott. These guys were just teenagers. I don't know. And this is a comfort for those of you who are still freshmen and sophomores. General biology class, remember? You wondered probably at that time if you will ever get out of that class. But now he's a, you know, and manager of Hope Channel and aspired businessman, well settled. So this is for the students. If you're thinking that it's never coming to an end, look at them. They have a baby already. Oh, wow, you have a bigger than babies. But let's get on. Even workers, I digress. That's all right, that's me. I'm looking at the clock. Don't worry, it's not 12 yet. Wherever you are, whatever your role is, you're a teacher, or a student, a staff, a worker, somewhere, even in high school, Sean, do you have a thorn? Okay, Sean says yes. Whatever that may be, let's ask ourselves the question, is it possible? Yes, the devil may send it to us. Satan may get it on our way. But let's remember that parachute is all we need. God's grace is sufficient. No matter what we are going through, let's not get distracted by the thorn. Even if it's a deep thorn, let's remember that the grace of God is sufficient. It covers us all, and it reaches to every corner, no matter where we are in life. So my prayer is that we will just trust in God. I know we are often told it's easy to say, but hard to do. But when it comes to your mind, think of the parachute. That's all you need. Because ultimately, the question is, are we covered by His blood? Are we willing to accept that umbrella of grace that Christ has given to us? Thank you.